Mommy Track Daddy Whispers podcast is now called Birth Agni Podcast.
To date, I think my partner Rohit says that I didn't hear a single scream through those 22 hours. And he says it so proudly. And I always laugh about it because I think I was like this principle during those 22 hours. Because if nobody was chanting with me, I would just like give them this glare and say, chant, you're supposed to chant, otherwise my contraction is not going to be okay.
This is the Birth Agni podcast, the fire that brings us alive, that burns myths and opens a channel of authentic natural birth stories. This show debunks the many myths of the medicalized births, showcases the plethora of choices a pregnant couple can make to embark on their empowered birth journey. I'm Divya Kapoor, a certified birth and lactation counselor and an aspiring traditional birth attendant. Let's get the flames blazing high. The Government of India launched Janani Suraksha Yojana in 2005, and this was launched to reduce maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate. And as a part of this scheme, women in rural areas and from the lower section of the society were picked up and were given incentives on commission to go and birth in the hospitals, meaning that more and more women were being encouraged to birth in an institution, and as a result of which, institutionalized births increased. The outcome of this in the last 5 years, based on the National Family Health Survey, NFHS 5, has been that the cesarean sections have increased by 13%, whereas the maternal mortality or the infant mortality rate has not improved at par, and it has only reduced by somewhere around 3% to 4%. That makes us ask a lot of questions. And I'm telling you this because today we have with us Baneen Karachiwala, who walks us through her inspiring home birth story, where placenta accreta was known in advance. Baneen is a public health researcher who has an extensive experience in the Indian public maternal healthcare system. And she talks to us about the various programs that have been launched, one of which is increasing institutionalized births. And she speaks to us about what are the challenges we face yet and where all improvements can be made as a precursor to her home birth story. And I won't keep you waiting from her story and her insights. So let's get started. So, okay, let's begin from the beginning. Tell us about yourself.
So I was born and raised in the city of Bangalore, where I did most of my formal education until up to my bachelor's. For my master's, I wanted to do something around the field of social work. So I went to do a master's in social work from TIS in Bombay, where my specialization was medical and psychiatric social work. Post which I worked with various national and international organizations, providing support in mostly programmatic interventions, research, and documentation. And this was up until last year, which kind of was a number of 19 years in total, where my focus was around the areas of health and development, with my interest areas being human rights and maternal and child health. So, kind of my focus has been working with pregnant women and newborn babies. About 7 years ago, we moved to Goa from Bangalore, and we kind of set up some hospitality spaces. So that's what I do now. I'm involved a lot in hospitality and design, but I obviously have a continued interest in public health and continue to dabble here and there in smaller assignments.
Yeah, your body of work is really inspiring. And it's
Thank you.
something that we need at this time for people to come
Yeah.
out and speak and tell. One of the things you've published about is respectful maternity care. And it's something that, we want to touch upon, basis your experience, how and what you've seen in your experience with birth in the medical system. And how did that help you somewhere down the line decide how you want to birth? Uh,
Yeah. So I think, about I want to say about 12, 13 years ago, I really started working in the area of pregnancy, intrapartum and postpartum care, and respectful maternity cares has emerged more. I want to say recently, at least in India, people have taken notice of it in sort of the last decade. But all of my work kind of was along a certain spectrum. So, of course, I was mostly working in the public health sector. So, it allowed me to actually witness a lot of births in government hospitals, which then also allowed us to question, what the barriers were to access care even there. It allowed us to actually talk to a lot of pregnant women to see what challenges they face along the way. And it kind of gave me a like a holistic picture of why, or rather, it made me question whether that move from home births that used to happen, maybe 2 decades ago, before the whole push towards institutional births, was really worth it. And that, I've questioned along the way, even in making the decision about my own pregnancy and home birth. Of course, the government wants the best for women. They're always looking to ensure that there is a positive outcome both for the mother and the newborn. But I've always wondered, looking at how the health system functions, whether they have the adequate capacity to deal with this kind of pressure, because India has one of the largest populations, which in fact then means that women are going to seek care where people are pushing them to seek care, but do they have the capacity to actually deal with that kind of pressure? And if they don't, then it's always been a thing that why don't they build that foundation before they actually make that move? So the challenges, that the barriers that we've seen are just lack of access, to the facility. There's the ambulance services, but there's not ever enough to the remote areas. Sometimes women don't have money to even get there. They have to borrow these things on loans, which then is so high that it's hard to pay back. The behavior of staff at these health facilities, which for me is crucial because that's one of the
Right.
things we really focus on in RMC, is that women actually leave a safe, space, which is their home, and decide to move somewhere else. But if they're actually not going to be received well by the system, then what's going to motivate them to seek care again when it's their second birth, it's their third birth? And there's a lot of factors that need to be considered before a push like that is made. At the end of the day, what a woman really needs is to see a friendly face, is, for someone to tell her it's going to be okay, not to be addressed by a number or a bed,
Yeah.
but actually by her name, be given that warmth that I know you're a person, you're not a number. And is something I don't see happening. In addition to, quite often, they're not really handled by providers of a certain category. They're left to be handled by interns, by nurses, and only when a complication arises does an OB step in, right? Or a
Hmm.
gynecologist step in. And
Hmm.
that's something I don't think a lot of women are comfortable with, but they don't have the power to say it because they're getting the care for free.
Hmm.
So this is one spectrum, this is one side of the whole thing where you've had the Dais and you've had local providers who may or may not have the medical knowledge per se, or the capacity to handle complications, but they do have the cultural knowledge, they do have the experience, which could have easily been absorbed by the medical ecosystem, which has not been. So I often say that that's a gap for me, that if you are trying to create these new cadres of A&Ms, and there used to be the LHVs and the nurses, and putting in interns in the mix, why not absorb the Dais who have that much local traditional knowledge and who have the comfort of being that emotional person for the woman who can then act as a bridge. Of course, there are the ashas these days, but again, that's viewed as a completely like a cadre that comes into the hospital and is still not given that much respect.
Right.
But I feel like there's that which is missing that could have easily been absorbed. So at one end, I've seen that bit. The other end of it is private care, which again I've witnessed because I have friends and relatives who have birthed, in bigger, fancier hospitals. And of course, the providers are very much present, so as to say, but not, I don't think, emotionally present.
Mm.
The job is to really make sure the mom and the baby are fine, but the going through that physiological process, which a woman would honestly quite like if she was given the details, encouraged to birth naturally, is completely absent. Because I feel like they are really all about numbers, both monetary and, getting women in and out so that they don't have to keep them too long in the facility. And of course, there's mandates of, you birth naturally, you can get out in 48 hours. If you have a C-section, you stay for 5 days. And then there's the whole convenience bit of when it's convenient for the provider to, actually carry out the birth for the woman. So even if they say, of course, we'll encourage a natural birth, it doesn't necessarily happen because we all know that hospital births, especially private hospital births, are mostly intervention led. So for me personally, it was this versus that. So that kind of led me to understand what was happening along the spectrum and tell me that I want to be the owner of my body. I want to have complete ownership of my birth. And I want to be allowed, of course, with someone trained to be able to make decisions about whether I want an epidural, whether I want, to bear down a certain way. I don't want to just be put on a bed and say bear down.
Mm.
I want to be able to choose my birth position, which is really not allowed, whether it's public care or private care. It's not allowed. Why is it not allowed? I mean, it is at the end of the day something that's coming out of you, and you should be in that comfortable space physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I think that's not available, which is why I said to myself, and it was not a hard, thankfully, it wasn't super hard to convince my partner because I think he had seen, what I'd been doing over so many years, and he understood that I'm going to still do what I want because at the end of the day, what really mattered to me was being in a happy space and a comfortable space where my provider would respect what I wanted. And that's the sole reason that helped me decide that I wanted to have a home birth. And I wanted to birth with someone who had the experience, but yet understood how important it is to a woman to birth naturally, take their time, feel happy about the experience. And that to me sums up what respectful maternity care is, that it's really the woman first, and she's the only one that matters. And the outcome is, of course, important, but the process is also important. So the next time round, if you want to, have another baby, at least that part in your head is not like daunting to you, right?
Mm.
It's more like, oh, at least I have a happy birth experience to look back to and say, yeah, it was worth it. I would do it again and I would do it the same way. So I think that was what led me to choose the home birth bit.
Yeah. So all of these factors that you've spoken about, they are huge, uh,
Yeah,
to say, and it's not a small thing to
yeah,
actually have seen both sides of the system
yeah,
and to know that healthcare is trying its best, but from a very loose foundation, I would say, because when you speak about safety, when you speak about comfort for the woman, when you speak about a woman being respected, when you speak about a woman being at the core in the center, being heard, all of this is crucial for the birth to unfold. That's
Yes.
important for the
Yeah.
baby to be born.
Yeah.
Otherwise, birth is really hindered. It's
Yeah.
not going to function the way nature wants it to function. And do you think we are in any way behind the West in this, or we are following the West in this? Because we do have our Dais from like just a generation or two before, and there are still people in the rural areas who are having home births with local Dais, but it's reducing. Dais are scared for some reason. I don't know why. They don't open up, but they're scared to meet people. They're scared to speak up. They're
Mm.
scared to even attend births today. I had someone very recently tell me that I wanted a local Dai to come to my birth, and being from this middle and upper
Mm.
middle class, they're really wary of us. We're going to call the
Yeah.
police, we're going to do this or that. Do you think we are behind the West, or we're just following the West, and it's the entire circle that we're going to follow and then come back to where we actually began?
Divya, quite frankly, I feel like the medical system has made it quite scary for traditional practitioners, right from instilling the fear of we will penalize you if you carry out these births, etc. I'm not sure how I would address this, but the government's mandate is to really ensure that maternal deaths and infant deaths are, really come down to like a zero, right? And that for me is full respect, because I think that's what India needs, because we did have very high maternal MMRs and IMRs. So I feel like from that angle, they're right in doing that. From the angle of not absorbing this cadre into their system, I feel that's completely wrong. Like I've mentioned before, they've missed out on like a whole existing intelligent, knowledgeable ecosystem. So I think from the government's angle, it's never going to go back. I think private institutions are trying to introduce this whole system back again. So I don't know whether we're behind the West or following the West, but I think people are trying to do things independently to ensure that women who are interested and women who feel this is important get what they want. Say, for instance, I know that doulas assist providers, but again, what's that subset? It
Right.
really requires a very grounded, confident provider to actually say, no, I want to train someone who has other sensibilities and qualities and qualifications to actually be able to do what they're meant to do. It's not a threat,
Mm.
like a doula is not going to replace a gynac, right? Or a dye is not going to replace a nurse. They all have their independent qualities and skills that they bring to the table,
Absolutely.
but it takes somebody else, it takes something else to realize that. And unfortunately, India doesn't have that realization yet, or they do have the realization, but they don't have the technical skills to make it happen,
Mm.
which I think is extremely sad. And even though a lot of great things happen on paper, there's not much that is carried out at the implementation table. If it's carried out at the implementation table, then there's not much monitoring happening. So there's a whole, I think it'll take a whole different ballgame. It'll take a whole kind of new young leadership to recognize the importance of these things that we're talking about to actually make it happen.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is social, like you're saying. A lot of the providers, like you said, do not have a free hand.
Yeah,
Many of the people who are at the center of healthcare are scared of
yeah,
litigation if anything goes wrong. So it's easier to do a surgery which happens in 15 minutes, and I'm sure it's most of it is going to be okay. And then it also saves me because
Yeah.
I did a surgery. So that was the last resort. I could do it,
Yeah.
which is why morbidity and the health of the woman and the baby is not being questioned because we're only after mortality. And
Right.
that Dais or the local midwives were not really at fault. Some of it
Yeah.
happened because of, yes, hygiene, which is why the institutions, yes, lack of care, continuous care.
Yeah.
Yes, but I love the fact that you've brought in a very important point that existing, intelligent, traditional, and experienced workforce should definitely be brought into the system because it's going to
Yeah.
help bring down another problem that's on the rise, the rising rates of cesarean
Yeah.
sections. And some day or the other,
Yeah.
we're going to question that. So,
Yeah.
yes. And now let's go on to, and I definitely do want to, have maybe another conversation with you in detail about all the work you've done, all the papers you've published, because that's important to speak about and bring into notice. But right now, onto your birth story. So you decided to have a homework. And were
Yeah.
you in Goa then? How did you find Karina, your midwife? And how did it all
So,
play out? Yeah.
I was actually, we had moved to Goa. I was shuttling between Goa and Bangalore at some point. Then I got pregnant. I had always known of Karina because I had other friends who had had their births with her. So I always knew that if I ever got pregnant, that even if I didn't live in Goa, because that was kind of not always the plan, I would then move to Goa or come see her and, make sure my birth was with her. And so when I got pregnant, immediately I knew that this was great. I live partially in Goa. I was moving back and forth. So I would do, kind of a week in Bangalore, 3 weeks in Goa, that kind of situation. So it really helped to get the best of both. So I started with medical, going to a hospital and getting my blood work done and, all of the routine scans and tests that were needed because I just wanted to make sure in the first trimester that everything was okay. And when I came for a couple of weeks to Goa in at the end of my first trimester, I contacted Karina and we had a chat on the phone, and subsequently she came home to meet me. And that for me again was really interesting and exciting that I had a provider coming home to me rather than me going waiting at a hospital, which sometimes took me 45 minutes to an hour. And it's not something you really want to do, when you're pregnant, you're hot, you're, not
Yeah.
feeling it, and you just like uh some kind of
Uh,
just a feel good, something to make
yeah.
you feel good
Maybe
and just
nurturing.
say,
It's nurturing.
yeah, nurturing, like, you're special, I'm gonna come see you, you don't need to come see me. And that immediately set me up to know that this is so exciting. And I remember my first, exam that she did, and this was super comparable to the hospital I went to in Bangalore, where, I was lying on the bed and they just squeezed some cold liquid onto my belly and, and then the machine went over it. And Karina, on the other hand, took the liquid in her hand and rubbed her palms to make it
Wow.
warm and then put it on my, and I just, it was just such a stark difference to me that it kind of just immediately told me that I had made the right choice. And so I did that right up to my 8th month, and she would come home every single month to do an exam. When we were about 6, 7 months pregnant, we also did some prenatal classes with her where she guided us through exercises and, what to expect when the baby comes, and just things around the birth process, things about loosening up. And
Mm,
she also just kind of taught us little things around why screaming actually doesn't help, when
mm,
you have your contractions. And to date, I think my partner Rohit says that I didn't hear a single scream through those 22 hours. And he says it so proudly. And I always laugh about it because I think I was like this kind of this principle during those 22 hours because if nobody was chanting with me, I would just like give them this glare and say, chant, you're supposed to chant, otherwise my contraction is not going to be okay. So, yes, my go-to person was Karina, and all the advice I actually took was from her because I still remember the other thing that the providers instantly told me when I walked into, the clinic on at my third month. They took my age down and they like literally vomited, oh, you're elderly gravida. And I'm
Oh
just
my
like,
God.
I'm only 36 years old. How does that make me elderly gravida? I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to be closer to, the age of menopause and trying to have a baby. And then I would still say, okay, yeah, I'm kind of too old to do that. But that's again something that people don't say because you're just trying to make the woman comfortable. You're trying to ease them into this new process
Yeah.
of life. But I do have to give it to them. The provider I chose there was more liberal and not conservative, I have to say. But at the same time, she was very wary of me and my choice of having a home birth. I did tell her that I
Mm.
am going to seek care for 8 months here, but I will eventually move to Goa and have a home birth. I was very clear with her about that from the start. And she was a little bit wary only because there was something in my ultrasound that indicated that there might be an issue when the placenta had to come out.
Mm.
It seemed to be a little bit stuck to the uterine wall. And so she was a bit wary. She was like, that might be an issue. I was like, yeah, I mean, I'm glad I have these scans and I will let my future provider know. And if we have to kind of keep anything in line for if I need to get to hospital, then that would be it. But otherwise, I have to say she was great.
Did she at any point, when she got to know about your home birth, which is also not very common in India,
Yeah,
did she, apart from the tests about the placenta being closely knit to the uterine
yeah,
wall, and probably she's also talking about the arteries and everything being embedded, so there's a chance of it bleeding post birth.
yeah.
So, apart from that, did she scare you at all? Like, and personally, how was she?
No, I think she didn't. And
That's
I think
lovely.
that's also the reason I chose to go see her because it wasn't a big fancy private hospital. It was a big hospital, but it was trust run and it was kind of in the southern part of Bangalore. I lived in the northern part of Bangalore, but I chose to go to the southern part of Bangalore because they're more like easygoing there. They're doctors who have practiced for like 50, 55 years.
Mm.
uh, they've seen it all. They're not new doctors. So I was allowed to really ask questions and I was allowed to talk and clarify anything and everything that I wanted. And for me, that was important, and which is why I chose
Huge.
to go
Yeah.
here.
Mm.
Yeah. So and possibly if I didn't have an option, Divya, of a home birth, or I would have probably liked to birth with them as well because they were really a lovely kind of hospital in Bangalore. So yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. Then post 8 months, what did you do? Did you stop going to her, or you?
I got onto maternity leave around when I was about 8.5 months pregnant, and I moved to Goa. So then, when I moved to Goa, of course, we continued to birth. I mean, we continued to see Corina, and that became more frequent.
Mm.
So from the beginning of 8 months, I was seeing her every 2 weeks, not every month. And I still went for like, 8.5, 9 month scan, ultrasound to a hospital in Goa because that was again important just to make sure there was enough amniotic fluid and all of the rest. And I guess then we just waited because I went into 42 weeks without having delivered, and that was pushing it quite a lot. But
Mhm.
at the same time, I was comfortable. Corina was comfortable. She said she's birthed women who went into 43, 44 weeks. And, but I think at the start of 42 weeks, I was getting a little uncomfortable in the sense that I had a big belly and it was
Yeah.
just hard to, maneuver and walk around and all of that. And I was like, okay, now I just want this baby to come out because she, whatever it is, has been in for a very long time. And I think it's time to say hello to the world. But Karina kind of said, why don't you take, and I live in this lovely village in Goa where, there are lots of slopes up and down and, lots of walks that one can take. So she said, let's try and induce very naturally. Let's go take a walk like on a really steep incline down, come back up. I tried everything, but nothing worked. And then finally I said, you know what? Let's just induce however you think it's okay. Then she said, okay. And one fine morning, she said, let's just get you some castor oil and got myself some castor oil. I don't know if you want to ever air this, but I'm telling you, but it was a concoction of castor oil, gin, and guava juice that I had,
Mm. How was
which
it?
kind of,
I've heard it's not very good to
it
taste.
was delicious because it had
Oh,
the gin.
juice and the gin. Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that was actually delicious. And I had to just gulp it down. So my first shot was at 10:30 in the morning. And she said, it'll kind of act also like a laxative.
Yes, that's how it
So
brings
it'll
you.
get things moving and it'll put the
Yeah,
pressure and all of that. Yeah.
yeah.
And so 10:30 in the morning, nothing happened till about 4. She said, take another one. So I took another one at about 4. Nothing happened. But at about kind of 9ish, I was feeling a little bit heavy and, like there was a lot of pressure. She said, take another one at about 10:15. And I did. And at that point, like I knew that something was going to, like my body was telling me that it's now beginning to feel like there's something coming. And so I just took a really nice, hot, long shower at about 11:30 at night. I kind of prepped a table in my room, lit some candles, had all the stuff organized for if the baby comes. And I kind of just laid down after my shower at about, I think 12:05. I felt like something was going to come and I felt something wet. So I jumped out of my bed and I like just stood there and my older dog, Coke, jumped with me because he had never seen me take such a big jump and I had never jumped so high either. And I just stood there and my water had broken basically. And he was literally just staring at me saying, why don't you just go to the bathroom? Like, what is wrong with you? You're like peeing all over the floor. And yeah, and so Corina had, and she had trained us to not panic. She said, I know this
Mm.
is your first time. Don't call me immediately. Um, Call me when you don't know what's happening. So I said, okay, interesting. So I looked at Rohit and I said, you know what? Water has broken. I think it's going to be some time. Why don't you take a nap? Because I know the next 24 hours is not going to be easy. So I said, get in as much sleep as you'd like, and I'll figure what's going on. And so I tried to lie down. It wasn't working. I was pacing around, wasn't working because there was I mean, obviously it's not a normal feeling, right? Something's pushing down a little bit. It's your first time, so you really don't know what to expect. But I kept it going till about 5:36 in the morning.
Oh, that's
Uh,
tremendous.
yeah, and then post that I was like, okay, now I don't know what's happening. I think it's morning, so Karina will be awake. Let me just text her. And I texted her and she was home in about an hour. She immediately came and kind of didn't have to do an exam even. And that's the other thing I loved, that she didn't actually have to make me lie down and open me up and check, and all of that. She just knew from touching my abdomen that
What's
there's a
happening?
lot of time. She said it's only just begun. You're probably only a centimeter dilated. You have the whole day to go probably. So she said, but I'm gonna stay with you. And that for me, like, literally warmed my heart. And I knew that someone is going to be there to take care of me. Because, I mean, the thing that I haven't brought up yet was that I decided not to have either of our families involved in this whole birth process, because I think for parents, it's extremely heartbreaking to see someone in pain. I think they feel a huge amount of unrest, just not knowing what might happen, when it'll come, whether things will go wrong, etc. So it was a decision not to have either sets of parents around. Also, for me to be able to be comfortable in my own skin, walk the way I
Right.
want, wear what I want, and not be subjugated to anything outside of what I felt comfortable
It's very wise to do that,
with.
I think.
Yeah, and both sides of parents were actually amazing to be okay with it, you know. So going back to that morning, she said, "Let's just have a nice breakfast." Our lovely friend brought us some South Indian breakfast, and I remember we just sat at the table, and I ate an idli and had some water, and everybody else was feasting on varas and dosas, and I was like, "Damn it!" But she was like, "I think don't eat anything oily." So I was like, "Okay, I agree. At least you're letting me eat." So I'm happy about that.
And that
And
brings me, sorry to cut you. That
yeah,
brings me. What had you seen in your experience with women eating or not eating during labor, and how did the contractions feel to you? Those early, what did you feel
yeah.
in your body?
So in terms of women eating on, I mean, nobody was really allowed to eat. They were allowed like a juice or something. They were allowed liquids. And these are women who were going to have normal deliveries. So, you know, women in, you know, allowed to have a juice or water and liquids. Uh, but I was allowed to eat, so I was very excited that I was allowed to eat. But I think over there also, quite frankly, it's probably because they don't know what to expect. Women don't know what to expect. Providers don't have the time to explain what's going to happen. And then, you know, they're always so short-staffed that if actually women eat and throw up or poop for that matter, then it's hard to clean up. Coming to my contractions, I remember feeling a lot of pressure on my back. So every time I had a contraction, of course, there would be like a surge in my abdomen, like, ouch, something's hurting. But there would be a lot of pressure on my back. So I constantly, and I kid you not, I had three people at my service that day. And every time I had a contraction, someone would be rubbing my back. And we would all be chanting Om, include like all four of us. And it was incredible. It was just so fascinating and so heartwarming to just feel three other people, you know, really feeling what you're feeling in some sense.
Yeah.
And that, like, just for that, I would have another baby, you know, because it was, I won't, but you know, just for that experience, it was just magical. And I till date, like, it brings tears to my eyes that if every woman could experience that kind of care, just to feel important, just to feel heard, seen, felt, all of it is just so important. Just to, you know, for people to understand that she's feeling hot and she needs to wear barely anything, or to be able to just hold whatever she wants to, or hug whoever she wants to, just to know that, you know, I'm feeling a certain way, and I it's important that I can do all of this with someone. It's very special, and I don't think people get to experience this. And even being in a private facility, people don't get to experience this. Everything is about, the focus is only about a healthy baby being born. There's no focus on the woman. There's nobody comes, the maximum is, are you okay? Are you feeling this? Are you feeling pain? Do you want an epidural? Yes, let's give it to you. But nobody's talking about, once you have the epidural, do you feel anything that you are meant to feel? You know, do the contractions come, but are you actually able to feel when to push? There's nobody talks about any of that. And I think it's
Disconnected.
so important. Yeah, it's there's such a disconnect that um, it really doesn't make anyone feel the way they should feel, because it was literally my space. I remember it was monsoon, it was raining outside, it was beautiful. I could
Oh,
stand at the window. I could, I had moved one of my beds outside. I could just hold my bed, and when I had the contraction, I could just hold it and breathe. Breathe, because I was in a safe space, because I knew there were people to look after me and comfort me. I didn't feel the need to scream. I felt like my body was being allowed to do whatever it wanted to do or felt like it needed to do. And that was incredible for sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Part of the reason why screaming the way we scream is not recommended, just for the listeners, is to because when you scream, your mouth, your face, and your pelvic floor, from where the passage from where the baby comes out, it's all
yeah,
connected. So when you scream the way we scream and that's an activity that you can do in pregnancy. If you're pregnant and listening right now, you can scream and see what you feel down there. You'll feel you're contracting the muscles you use to pee and the
yeah,
muscles of your vagina and the surrounding pelvic floor. But if you roar or hum or chant
yeah,
the way
yeah,
Baneen, you're saying, you use a lot of your your core in that.
yeah.
Mm. And you'll feel when you're roaring like a lioness, you feel that area opens up because your face is
Opens up. Yeah,
relaxed. So
yes,
all you need to do is let the baby do the work
yeah,
with the work that's happening in the body, and keep yourself relaxed
yeah.
down there. And
Yeah, and this is just, kind of very similar to emotion, right? When you're happy, you're just feeling so much more relaxed versus when you're tense and you're angry and you're trying to close up. It's exactly the same when you're giving birth. I mean, your how relaxed you feel is how easily you're going to open up, and that's what I'm saying. It's so important to be in that space though, right? To be able to do that and to be able to feel it.
the space where you birth is precious. It's
Yeah,
sacred in birth, and that's going to be the very foundation of how the birth is going to unfold. And nobody knows how it's going to unfold.
yeah,
Nobody in the world does,
yeah,
eventually.
yeah,
Uh, so being in a space is a gift that you can give
yeah,
yourself, that you can be free
yeah,
to do how your heart feels, because that's going to relax you, and that's
yeah,
exactly what you need to birth. And not be in a
yeah,
space where everybody is scared that nothing should go wrong because something would then be done to us. So
yeah,
that's where owning your own birth looks like. That's what it looks
yeah,
like.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then
So, and then I think we went through the day literally, and about 6:37 at night was when I felt like I needed an exam. I said, I think, Corina, it's been too long. I sort of want you to just have a look
you
and see, because
asked for
also the
it.
contract, yeah, I did. And also, she was kind of feeling my abdomen every couple of hours. And at that point, I said, I'm ready to just lie down, actually. And funnily, in all of our research that we've done, we always ask the question, what was the labor position that you took? And of course, in 99% places, you're not allowed to do anything but lie down on your back. And that's something I knew that I didn't want to birth that way, because it's the most, it's a position that really isn't against gravity and doesn't allow you to birth very well. So, uh, but I was so tired from the day and my back was hurting so much that I said, can I just lie down for a bit, And I think that in many ways it pushed my birth. It made it like the process slightly longer. If I had just stayed up a little while longer, I may have had an easier birth. But I think Corina really understood how my body was feeling and that I just needed a bit of rest before I could get going again. That she kind of examined me, and I was already at about 8, 9 centimeters. So she said, if you want to start trying, we can start trying. And I said, yeah, I think I'd like that. And at that point, kind of, I started pushing a little bit and breathing the way she was directing me, etc. And I think I had tried for about 10, 12 minutes and nothing really was happening. And also at that point, so I had Corina on one side, I had Rohit on one side, and I had my friend Simran on the other side. And I felt, sometimes you're so in your skin and you like are absorbing everything that everybody's doing, like how they're looking at each other, what glances, what these nonverbal communication is saying, and all of that. And I looked at the three of them exchanging glances, not so much Corina, because she was my birth provider and she's done this like maybe 1,000 times, but I got the sense that they felt like I may not be able to pull this off. I got the sense that they felt that this is too hard. It's because obviously it's also their first time, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah, it
and
is
I'm
hard.
having, yeah, and I'm having kind of a tough time, and I'm saying, no, I am going to do this. This is my birth experience, and I want to do it, and I will show you that I can do it. And I think at that point, I was just like, yeah, guys, watch out. Like, this is going to happen, and I'm going to prove you wrong. And I immediately said to Corina, I don't want to lie down. I want to get up and I want to try in another position. And she said, do you want to try standing? I said, sure. Tried that. Didn't work. Want to try squatting? Tried that. Didn't work. Then finally, I said, I'm just going to walk around a little more. Let me just feel it. I walked around for about maybe 20 minutes or so, and they were all just extremely patient, waiting, rubbing my back, around me, etc. Then finally, Corina said, do you think you want to go to the bathroom and sit on the pot and try? And I was like, why not? It sounds like I'll still get, some amount of support and I can try pushing there. And I think to that Rohit was like, on the pot, really? Like, is the baby gonna be born on the pot? I was like, listen, whatever works at this point, let's do it. So yeah, so that's where we went. And I remember, Simran was really lovely and, she just waited outside the bathroom with her camera. Yeah, with her camera, just saying, I will take pictures. Like the bathroom is not large enough. I think three of you are more than enough. So I said, sure. And so Corina put a stool in front of me on the commode and sat. Rohit was on my right, and and that was it. And I think in a matter of about three contractions, I felt something like intense. I felt like the circle of fire. And at that point, I knew that her head was coming out. And Corina was like, her head is there. You just need one or two solid pushes. And I remember with one more contraction and push, her head was out. And that, I think, was the moment where I had my first emotional outburst where I just felt so much relief. That intense burning sensation was, I had just left me. And her head had emerged, which made me know that I'm almost there. And with another contraction, I kid you not, Divya, she just slipped out, all of her. And I don't think I've ever felt that sense of relief in my life. It felt like I had won the biggest prize that I could have, managed, and and all on my own. It was just incredible. I just continued to weep on the pot, and Corina just like kind of just held her. She waited. She gave me 30 seconds to a minute to just let me experience that relief and not push me to do anything else. And in that 30 seconds to a minute, she had just gently just wiped her a little bit to place her on me. And when she did, like I said before, that I immediately my eyes went to where they had to go, and I had another outburst saying, "Oh my God, she's a girl!" And this is the best, like best present I could have ever given myself, because that's what I wanted. And yeah, and she just let her be on me to take that in, and the pictures will, allow you to see that. And then, like a minute or two later, she got uh, Rohit to cut the umbilical cord, and it was precious. It was a moment. It was yeah, it was just us in a time capsule, and there was no one to ruin it. It was exactly how I had envisioned it to be. And then, we kind of gravitated towards the bed, and we kind of just had a moment with her, and we got her first feed, and all of it was in place, and that was that. And we were kind of reveling in the joy of having our baby girl for about 30 minutes, which just flew by, because also those 30 minutes were just spent by Corina in cleaning up and putting everything away and disposing things that she needed to dispose of. And before we knew it, I think about 40 minutes had passed. There was no sign of the placenta. So then she was like, "Okay, you can leave the baby now with the others, and come, let's try to get your placenta out." She said, "Why don't you squat and we'll just kind of gently try to push it out and all of that." And at that point, something big just fell out, and I was like, "Oh, there you go, it's out." But she was like, "Oh no, that's not your placenta." And I was like, "Okay, then what just came out?" And she was like,
Oh,
"That
God.
was a huge clot of blood." And
Hmm.
I was like, "Okay." And at that point, I knew in my head, I knew that, and this was the moment I was prepared for, because the chitter chatter of the doctor in Bangalore came rushing through to my head saying, "You know that you might need to go to hospital, and the best part is done with. You've got what you want. Now look after yourself." And it was just all a quick conversation in my head. And Karina said, "Let's just try one last time. Let's go back to the bathroom and try." And I said, "Okay," and we did, and it just wasn't working. And she was also, kind of anxious and nervous because she didn't want it to cross an hour. And I had already lost so much blood. So
Hmm.
and I was not one of those women who had a great hemoglobin through my pregnancy. It was always kind of borderline 10. I was on iron folate. I was eating, all the the good veggies, the beetroot and the spinach and all of that. But I've never had great hemoglobin as a young adult and a woman. So that was a concern for me and for her as well. At that point, when I came out of the bathroom, I fell. And That, I think, was one of the scariest times, not for me, obviously, because I didn't know what was happening, but for her, for sure, because she knew what was going on, and she thought she had lost me for a second, which I think till date she talks about, and also being a home birth. Now, that's one of the situations that one has got to be prepared for, right? Then, when complications like this happen, you need to know, your provider needs to be confident um, to handle all of these complications. They can't go into a tizzy and be like, "Oh shit, what
Hmm.
now, what?"
Hmm.
And that was the thing that I loved about Karina, is that she thought, like, she was very quick with her thinking. She had already made sure she had these connections lined up, that if something were needed, then we would be there in 10 minutes, and the doctors would be able to take care of the situation. So at that point, it took me like probably about 30 seconds to open my eyes, and she had the scariest, blank look on her face, like she had seen a ghost. And I said, "Hey, what's happened?" She's like, I thought you were gone. And I was like, oh my God, no, I'm here. And everybody was just like, okay, she's here. And Karina literally got into this mode of Rohit, pick up the baby. I'm picking up a pillow. Let's go now.
Hmm.
And by then, my friend Simran had left because it was late and the baby had come. And, I said, just go. You've had a long day, etc. So it was just us. The dogs were extremely panicked because we had to leave immediately. And so one of them was outside, one of them was inside. We just, kind of locked the bedroom so that they wouldn't be exposed to any of the blood or things that had been like left. And she rushed me to the closest near nursing home, which was about 8 minutes away. So, and there was a doctor on call there, and then it turned out that we had to do a DNC just to, get everything out. And I still remember I was lying on the table on the in the OT, and I had never met this doctor before because he was not a consulting doctor during my pregnancy. And the only thing I looked at him and I said is that, Doc, I want Karina holding my hand while you do this. That's the only way I can trust you. And and the next thing I know, Karina is walking towards me. I held her hand and I went under. So I knew that whatever happened to my body post that was really her responsibility, and that the trust that I had put in her was, immense. And she literally was my saving grace. The next thing I know, I had woken up in my room at about 3 in the morning because I think 10:35 Zoya was born. We got to the facility about 11:30. About 12, I had this DNC, and it took me about 3 hours to get out of the general anesthesia. And of course, Corina wasn't there, but Rohit and Zoya were there and in the room, and I think the one thing I had said to Rohit was, "Don't give her any outside milk. Like, she cannot have anything." And Corina also had said she doesn't need anything. Zoya doesn't need anything. She's good for a whole 12 hours for sure. Like if she wants, give her like a drop or two of glucose water at all. That's it. And but he was just so nervous because it was his first time as a dad, and and she was like cooing and crying, and he like had no idea. And I think I woke up at 3 o'clock, and because the anesthesia was fading, I was feeling cold, and I don't even know whether the AC was on or not, but I think it was. And I think I just screamed at him over above that. I said, "Put the AC off, it's so cold." And I just looked that she was okay, and I think I went back to sleep. And the next thing I wake up at like 7:38 in the morning and feeling like I had never given birth. Uh, I literally woke up, got out of bed. He said, "Do you need any help?" I said, "No, I'm just going to go to the washroom and see if I can pee." And I don't think I've ever been such a nervous bundle of energy until I sat on that pot and I was like, "Oh my God, how am I going to do this? How I've just had a baby. How is it going to come out?" Like, imagine a baby has come out, but to pee, So because I just didn't know how it would feel, right? And I peed. It was just, it felt normaler than before, and there wasn't a sensation of pain, of hurt, of anything. And I was like, but they would, I would have had like a second-degree tear that they would have had to stitch up. And, I had the DNC, and I was like, nothing. Like, I felt nothing. And I was just like, did I even have a baby? Like, this is incredible. And I was so happy, Divya, that I just went, I picked Zoya up, and I was like, come, let's feed. And I like put her down, and she just latched, and she just fed. And I think Corina came in at 9:30, and she's like, come, let me show you. I was like, she's already fed, Corina. And she was in tears. She was just so happy. She said, "This is amazing," and like kudos to that woman. She went back home at I don't know, 1:30, cleaned up my house, came back at 8:30, 9 in the morning, brought me juice, brought me, something to eat. Uh, I was like, this is what really, one needs when you've had such an intense experience of your life, that there's someone to come and care for you even before you know it, right? And nobody disturbed us through the night. I had a great night sleeping. Zoya had a great night sleeping, and and that was that. She fed. I stayed a night in the hospital, just for them to watch my vitals and make sure I was okay and all of that. And of course, the downside of this was that because of the blood I lost, my hemoglobin had slipped to about 6.5, which was kind of low. But that's something I had to take care of. In the first week of her being born, I went back to that same nursing home for some IV iron, and that sorted itself out. But for the next 1 week of Zoya being born, I had Karina come home every single day, every single morning, about between 11 and 12, to just check up that she was feeding properly, um, that I was in no pain, that she could teach us to give her the first massage, to kind of bathe her the first time. And that, of course, only happened on day 6 or 7. She said she doesn't need to be bathed, let her vernix come off nicely, let her just enjoy being in her own skin, don't need to rush any of it. And just to be there to answer any questions, and just to be there as a matter of, emotional support. So that was how it went, and it was just, it was magnificent. It was the best postpartum care that I could get. I couldn't have asked for any better. I've seen how postpartum care is dealt with in hospitals, both public and private. It's just a matter of making sure the baby is fed, and the baby sleeps and there's nothing wrong with the baby, and there's really no focus on the woman, except for, can you breastfeed the baby? Is the milk adequate? Is are you having any feeding with latching? I mean, are you having any problems with latching? All of that.
Yeah,
And
very
besides,
technical.
yeah,
One thing to
exactly.
another.
There's no emotional connect. There is nothing around. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Your body has gone through so much. Uh, is there something that one can do for you? There's never any of that. And from that point, I was just like, I felt incredibly blessed that, I had someone who could just be there for me through it all, and without having to worry about hurting someone's feelings, because again, you're also in that phase where your body has gone through so much that you also want the time to rest, the time to breathe, the time to engage with your little one. And when you have a lot of people around, and it might work for a lot of women. For me, as a person, I am quite private. I like that one-on-one time. I want to be able to bond and engage. And I feel like the first week of a mom's life or a baby's life is so precious that it's really the time to get to know each other, to just be able to look in each other's eyes and just be amazed at the wonder that you've created. And yeah, and it was just precious that I was able to do that. And I mean, hats off to, Rohit as well, who had, uh, I was literally just feeding Zoya, and I was given that time to rest and not have to burp her or put her to sleep or to bathe her or massage her or anything. All of that I started doing only post 1 week, because I really just wanted to be and not really engage in much more than enjoying my time with her.
Yes, that's so
And
crucial.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I wanted to, now circle back. I have a few questions. So
yeah.
when this was the doctor said, spoke to you about the placenta. Karina must have also heard about it. She must have obviously gone through. What did she say then?
So I think that's what her action plan was. She said that if you want the home birth, we will do it, but there will be a doctor on standby for if anything were to happen, which is why the doctor was on standby and was readily available at midnight,
Mm.
to do this. So I think she was very aware. She was very comfortable with her own practice because she's not an amateur. She has birthed, I want to say, over 1,000 babies as of now, and that number is probably has probably changed. So I think it was with much caution that she did it because also technically I was her last home birth, post which, her lovely center has started. So I think all her home births, I'm sure she treats them with much caution and knowing very well that there could be things that might not go the way they're supposed to. But she also has something in place to be able to deal with that.
Yeah. One of the reasons I asked is precisely this because we are so scared of a
Yeah,
lot of things and we're easily scared. This was something which was important
yeah,
and it can go either way, which
yes,
it was a tremendous to hemorrhage postpartum and to
yes,
have pieces and have the entire placenta inside
yes,
at a point when you're heavily bleeding
yes,
can be very, very critical.
yes,
Knowing all of that, to have someone know and have a plan in action, that says a lot. That
yes,
in birth
correct.
in itself is safe. And
Yeah,
yes, we need to, the way we prepare for everything, we need to prepare for it. And that's where a lot of the work needs to go as against fearing what's going
correct.
to go wrong and just
Yeah,
work with the flow.
yeah.
And another question that I had is through the entire birth, was the heartbeat being checked? And how often was it being checked?
Yes, it was being checked. I think she was checking it every maybe 1.5, 2 hours. That's how often it was being checked.
So this is also
Yeah,
something, one of the questions that everybody asks. Okay,
yeah,
how is the heartbeat going to be monitored? So all of these things, when you go in for a home birth, when you decide for all these things, all these questions can be asked. And how things work at a home birth can also be discussed to your comfort and to your understanding. That's the basis of how care should look like between a provider and somebody who's taking the service, that both of them
yes,
are at the same page.
yeah.
And the next is, so when you had the baby and when you went to the bed, when there was a lot of bleeding, were you given any herbs? Were you giving something to stop the bleeding?
No, I wasn't given anything. It was a very quick decision to
Mm.
move out and go to the hospital because there wasn't, I mean, we didn't want time to be against us.
Yeah.
So it was a very quick decision to just lock up the house and leave. It took us 2 minutes to just get in the car and get there in about 8 minutes.
Hmm.
And there were people waiting to take me in and stuff. So I think it's really about the time, uh, and uh, and like I said, Karina is, I think she's not like a traditional practitioner and also has a very good, well established connect in Goa because she's been here many, many years. The thing I want to point out here, and is for other women listening as well, is that the one thing you can't do in situations like this is blame your provider. You can't say, oh, but you said you agreed to a home birth, and we just figured everything will be okay. And like you said before, Divya, no one birth, I mean, no births are similar to each other. Each birth story is very different, and that means that each one has the same risks associated with the next. It's really, a matter of chance. It's really a matter of a lot of factors, you, whether you have an absolutely, a perfectly timed birth where nothing goes wrong and you have no complications, or you have one where everything is perfect until after the birth, like mine, where I did have a complication. But at that point, if we had panicked, if we had started blaming someone, it wouldn't have worked, right? It's at the end of the day, the decision to birth at home was mine. There was someone who helped me do it and made what I wanted happen. But there is that screw in your head which you need to use carefully and say, now it's my time to also make sure I'm okay. And when someone's allowing, or helping for that to happen, you have to work with them and not against them. So, and I say this because I have heard other instances where people have not been, they operate in a way where they say, oh, but the baby should have been born by now. No, you're not that provider, right? You have to allow the provider to make those decisions for you, help you with those decisions. And you can't kind of just completely negate what's the core,
Right.
right? It takes its own course. It's not something that it's not like a candy you need to buy at a shop. It's a baby that needs to be birthed. So you've got to give it time and you've got to respect who's helping you with it. And I think only if you're in that position where you have the knowledge, where you have the fierceness, where you have the kind of will to be able to make those decisions. And I'm not saying take that chance. These are not chances that can be taken. If you feel like a hospital birth is going to make you feel safe and that's what you need and want, please birth in a hospital. But if there's an experience that you're looking for that works with your ideology and works with what you want as a vision, then do that. But at no point must you battle with that, because it is a process. It is things that people that work together to make it happen.
Yeah, right. The fact that in today's extremely consumerist world, we are offloading everything onto someone else. It's very easy to blame and say, this is not happening
Yeah,
because you're not doing enough. And like you said, it doesn't help. And it actually is minimizing or not letting people come into this workforce,
yeah,
join the community of midwives that women need primarily because of this. And like you said, if you don't feel comfortable in a home birth, because that means you're trusting yourself, that means you own what you're doing, you are
yeah,
responsible for what you're doing. And one of the things that I always tell women is, wherever you go, you are responsible for something as natural, no a physiological process as birth is. And you're going to sign a paper in the hospital itself that you take responsibility. Whereas that's not in practice, that's just a formal agreement.
yeah,
We do offload our responsibility. And the moment we enter a system and when we offload our responsibility, we don't want to do the work. That also happens sometimes because it takes time. It is hard. Birth is not a candy, like you said. Birth is not easy
yeah,
and it's different for different women.
yeah,
Some women have an orgasmic experience through the birth.
yeah,
Some women feel what they feel. They feel the intensity. It is hard work, but it does bring you so much on the other end. Easier breastfeeding, easier postpartum, your body, a more intact body. There's so much. So everything has its pros and cons. It's up to you what you go and choose for. And I'm so thankful to you, so grateful to you to bring it to notice that blaming doesn't help anybody. And that also goes deeper and goes, down the line when we become parents, we can't offload everything onto a provider because my daughter is sick or my son is sick. We need to look deeper into what makes them sick. It can be emotional reasons also. It can be
yeah,
so many other things. pharmacy and pharmaceuticals, I'm not pro and against anything. That's just my personal opinion. Allopathy or drugs, when we start thinking that everything can be solved by a pill,
Yep.
it doesn't help in the long run. It comes with
Yeah.
its own side effects, and
Yeah.
we need to know the side effects as well. So what we're paying the price for, we pay the price for everything we choose, and we also then gain all the benefits for what we choose.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Baneen, for such an
Thank
interesting
you.
conversation. I
It
had a
was really
lovely.
fun.
Yes.
And I can't believe it's taken me 4.5 years to do this. I was in fact just a friend, a really dear friend, had no idea I had a home birth. And I think a week ago I was kind of narrating the experience to him, and then he said, "Why isn't this on a podcast yet?" And it was
Yes.
so funny because I was just like, yeah, maybe soon." And that was kind of around the time we were talking as well. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to share, and hopefully this is just useful to other women to just be brave and, kind of not let fear get in the middle of one of the most beautiful experiences in life. That, it's really possible. It's possible with the right kind of provider. So the one thing I want to say is just choose your provider well, choose your provider wisely, do a little bit of homework, but be safe. There's always challenges to every kind of birth. There's challenges to a home birth, there's challenges to a hospital birth. uh, but I think one just needs to know what is for them.
Mhm.
But having said that, please birth more naturally, question more.
Yes.
Uh, don't be afraid to ask questions, because that's the only way you can make decisions. And start these questions while you are pregnant. Start at your first point of interaction with your provider, so that you are able to make that choice by the time you get to your third trimester of what kind of birth experience you want. And I think unless the younger lot of women who don't ask these questions, our health service delivery system is not going to change. Providers are still going to provide what they are used to providing, and respectful maternity care is really going to just be hidden in the cupboards of people who really are comfortable with, answering questions and providing good care.
There is a field beyond fear, where the body is empowered to take on labor and birth. To land there, it is crucial to take birth education. To enroll into our unique labor and birth preparation course, reach out to us at www.birthagni.com or scroll through all available prenatal and postnatal preparation classes. Thank you for listening, all in the spirit of birth, womanhood, and freedom. Remember, you got the bar. This podcast is about physiological birth and does not offer or claim to provide medical knowledge or diagnosis.